My father told me to go live in the streets, and then he turned off the porch light. I was 24, standing in the rain on the steps of my childhood home, one canvas bag in my hand, listening to the deadbolt slide shut. "No daughter of mine throws away a real career," he'd said. My mother watched from the window, motionless. My sister smiled. They were all so sure I was the failure, the embarrassment, the one who'd never amount to anything. For 10 years, they told that story to everyone in Ridgewood. But here's what none of them knew about those 10 years. And what I did 3 weeks after my father finally called me, not realizing who he was really calling. Welcome back to Tranquil Drama Stories, where we sit with the quiet women who were underestimated and stay for the moment the room finally goes silent. If a story feels like it could be yours, that's why you're here. You're not alone. Settle in, drop a comment if this hits home, and be sure to subscribe. Let me take you back to the dinner that started everything. I was 24 and had just walked away from a graduate architecture program. A contractor offered me a crumbling Victorian. Could I bring it back to life and sell it? I said yes immediately. To my father, Henry Voss, I'd thrown away a future for rotted wood. At dinner, he dropped his fork and said, "You had a real path. Now you want to dig in the dirt like a day laborer." My mother, Eleanor, nodded. My sister, Caroline, the one with law school and a diamond ring, added softly, "Not everyone is built for ambition." Meredith, I didn't argue. I'd learned arguing with them was like pushing on a locked door. What none of them saw was that I'd finally found something they couldn't understand. The question wasn't whether I'd fail. It was why they were so desperate for me too. You have to understand the Voss name in Ridgewood. Henry developed half the east side, the strip mall, the office park, the gated cul-de-sac. People shook his hand at the diner. Our house had a circular driveway and a chandelier. My mother spent 30 years defending that appearance like a burning building. That spring, at Caroline's engagement party, I stood near the bar when the house phone rang. My father stepped away. His jaw tightened, his knuckles white. Then he laughed too loudly and said, "We'll square it Monday. No trouble at all." He hung up, fixed his smile, and walked back into the lights. I was the only one watching. I didn't know then I'd just heard the first crack in a rotting foundation. 2 weeks later, I'd signed on the Victorian, using a small inheritance from my grandmother Iris and a credit union loan. I told my parents, foolishly hoping for pride. My father shot up from his chair. "You took out a loan? The Voss name doesn't beg for scraps. You're making this family a joke." Then he said the words I'd carry for 10 years. "If you want to live like you've got nothing, then go live in the streets." I waited for my mother to speak. She reached toward the hall table where, I'd later learn, she'd hidden an envelope of cash, her own apology. My father said her name once. Sharp. She stopped. The envelope stayed. I packed one bag. Rain started. I stepped onto the porch and heard the deadbolt. Then the porch light went dark. I didn't cry. Something in me had gone very calm, the way a house quiets before you tear out everything rotten. Caroline followed me to the gate. She didn't come to stop me. "Don't make a scene at the wedding," she said. "Mom's already stressed." Then she delivered the line that echoed for a decade. "You're not a real Voss. Real Vosses don't dig in the dirt." She turned away, but I saw her stop at the steps, staring up at the house with fear, not triumph. Her shoulders were tight, like a woman checking whether the floor under her was still there. Later I understood. Caroline wasn't cruel because she was strong. She was cruel because she was terrified of ending up where I stood. She'd married into the Whitfield lifestyle, and the ice beneath it was thinner than she knew. I drove 2 hours through rain to Marlow, where I knew one person and owned one rotted Victorian. For 8 months, I slept in the workshop on a cot with my grandmother's quilt. I learned to frame and sand so no crew could lie to me. The Victorian sold for nearly double, and the credit union backed me for 2 more houses, then 4. The real change came through a woman named Maeve Conley. She was 81, widowed, and needed her home modified so she could stay out of a facility she couldn't afford. As I lowered her counters and widened doorways, she told me about her friends all facing the same impossible math. Too much house, too little money, nowhere decent to go. That night, the real idea hit me. Not flipping houses, but building affordable senior housing that let people live with dignity. I wrote it on a paint can label and pinned it over my cot. I didn't know that company would one day be worth more than all my father's developments, but I knew I'd finally found something worth digging in the dirt for. The only person who called me that first year was my grandmother Iris. Every Sunday, her gravel and gospel voice asked what I was building. When I told her about Maeve, she said, "Build something that keeps people warm. Meredith, that's the only kind of rich that holds." A week later, an envelope arrived with $2,000 in 10s and 20s that smelled like her purse. I refused, but she told me not to insult her. I kept that envelope in a drawer for a year, unspent, because some money isn't for spending, it's for remembering whose hands it came from. During one call near the end of that year, she said, "The land my daddy left me, the 40 acres past Ridgewood, that's going where it belongs. I've seen to it in writing." I told her not to talk like she was going anywhere. She just laughed and changed the subject. I should have listened harder, because that land and the letter she sealed in a steel box would become the hinge the whole story swung on. I kept the $2,000 untouched for a full year before I understood why. Some of you already know. If a quiet promise ever carried you through a hard season, share it in the comments and stay with me. Because Ridgewood wasn't done with me yet. 4 years passed. Voss and Conley Restoration, named after Maeve's late husband, because she cried when I asked, had 30 employees and a waiting list. We'd opened 2 senior communities and broken ground on a 3rd. I stayed invisible on purpose. No social media, no profiles, no last name that might travel back. I told myself it was humility, but the truth was harder. I didn't want my father proud of my money. I wanted him to have been wrong about me. That difference is the whole story. So I built in the quiet. The only loose thread was a joint checking account my parents had opened when I left for college. Statements still went to their house. I'd made one small automatic deposit out of habit, then ignored it for years. That account, the one I forgot, was the door I'd left unlocked. And someone in my family had noticed. My accountant, Priya, found it while consolidating my books. She slid a printout across my desk and tapped a column. These withdrawals had been going on for years, small, steady, online access. The dates stretched back almost 6 years. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. The total was just over 40,000. I asked who. Priya had the answer. A secondary user added long ago. A name I hadn't thought about in a decade. Daniel Whitfield, my sister's husband. Daniel managed money for half of Ridgewood's elite. My father had added him as a convenience without telling me. It wasn't the amount that chilled me. It was the patience. Someone had been reaching into my life a little at a time, betting the useless failure would never look. I asked Priya where the money had gone. She couldn't see from here. So now I had a thread to pull, and pulling it would take me back to the one place I'd sworn never to drive to again. I tried to close the account that afternoon. The bank said no. The old agreement required both primary owners, me and my father, to sign in person. I could freeze it, but a joint owner could dispute it. To free my own name, I needed Henry Voss's signature. I could have driven down and demanded it, but that would tip my hand. The withdrawals would stop, and the trail would go cold. So I did the hardest thing. I waited and watched. I drove to Ridgewood on a gray Saturday, first time in years. The town looked smaller, the way places that hurt you always do. I sat in a back booth at the diner, the town's real newspaper. Soon I heard my name, the younger Voss girl. Meredith living off the state, I heard. Such a shame. Henry and Eleanor did everything for her. So that was the story they'd told. Not that I left, but that I'd failed. A drain. A cautionary tale. They'd built a version of me out of lies. And the whole town had moved into it. On the way out, I saw the billboards. Voss Grand Vista Luxury Living comes to Ridgewood. My father's airbrushed face smiled over glass towers that did not belong here. A quiet question formed. Where does a man in a town this small get money for towers like that? I already suspected some of it had come from me. The answer came from Sam, an old contractor my father had stiffed. Over coffee, Sam told me Grand Vista was in deep trouble. Henry had sunk everything in and then gone looking for more, taking investments from neighbors, the church fund, retirees who trusted his handshake. Project's bleeding, Sam said. He's robbing Peter to pay Paul and running out of Peters. Then it clicked. The withdrawals from my account weren't greed for its own sake. They were a patch. My $40,000, taken silently, was propping up my father's lie while he told everyone I was the failure. I drove home to Marlow gripping the wheel. Not angry but cold and focused. I'd spent 10 years building. Now I started thinking about what I could build that would bring the whole rotten thing down. 2 days later, a lawyer named Hollis called. He'd handled my grandmother's affairs. Iris had left instructions for a sealed box to be delivered to me alone, 2 years after her death. Inside were a letter and a deed. Years ago, she'd quietly transferred the 40 acres past Ridgewood into my name and recorded it at the county. The land had been legally mine long before I opened that box. She wrote, "You are the only one who builds instead of borrows." The land was never his to borrow against. I made sure of that in writing, with your name on it. I sat in his office holding 60-year-old paper and the whole map rearranged. If Grand Vista was as desperate as Sam said, my father had surely pledged those acres as collateral land he believed was his but legally belonged to me. I didn't call him. I called my lawyers and asked them to teach me how a development like Grand Vista dies. They explained distressed debt. When a project fails, the bank sells the loan at a deep discount to whoever will collect. Whoever buys that note holds the entire project in their hands. I asked carefully, if I bought the debt, I'd own my father's leverage over himself? My lawyer said, in effect, you'd own his fate and anything pledged against it, including the 40 acres he pledged that weren't his, including the lie. I felt something settle. I wasn't going to scream at him. I was going to do the patient thing, the built thing. I would wait for Grand Vista to hit the edge, then step in with my name on every paper, not as the begging daughter, but as the one holding the keys. I set up a holding company 2 layers removed from my name and watched the Grand Vista loan. It fell faster than I expected. But I wasn't the only one circling. Someone else was quietly bidding. Daniel Whitfield. The man who'd been draining my account for 6 years was now trying to buy my father's debt to swallow the project and leave his father-in-law with the wreckage. I almost laughed. The family that called me a failure was a nest of people robbing each other. Daniel thought he was bidding against a faceless investor. He had no idea it was the sister-in-law he'd been stealing from. I told my lawyers, whatever it takes, we win the debt. Grand Vista missed deadlines. Cranes stopped. Model units went dark. Investors panicked. An elderly couple who'd invested their retirement couldn't reach Henry. A widow from the church who'd been promised 10% was telling everyone. My father's response? He threw a Save Grand Vista gala to reassure everyone a mysterious partner was about to rescue the project. Caroline helped plan it, smiling for cameras, no doubt saying, real Vosses take care of their own. I read the notice and felt the pieces lock. He was promising a savior. He just had no idea who. The sale closed on a Thursday. My company bought the Grand Vista note for a fraction of its face value, thanks to 10 years of reserves. The collateral schedule listed 40 acres past Ridgewood, pledged by Henry Voss as security. That was the land my grandmother had already deeded to me. He'd borrowed millions against land he didn't own. And the rushed title work never caught her quiet transfer. The collateral was void. The loan, now mine, was propped on a foundation that didn't exist. I sat holding the closing documents, thinking of the porch light going dark. I had the note, the deed, the truth. The whole town would be in one room in 3 days, waiting for the mystery savior. I bought a plain dark dress and had my lawyer print 3 copies. 2 days before the gala, Caroline called first time in 10 years. She didn't apologize. She asked for money. Things got weird, but family helps family. Daniel and I hit a rough patch cash flow. You might have a little saved up from your projects. The condescension could strip paint. I asked what kind of rough patch. She started complaining about Daniel moving family money around for years, assuming it was all above board. Some account Dad set up. She spoke about the $40,000 like it was loose change in a family drawer. So she'd been living on the money stolen from me, never caring where it came from. I told her I'd think about a loan, but I had no intention of giving a dime. I just wanted her in that hall. The night before, my mother called. Her voice was thin and uneven. She told me about the night they put me out, how she'd had an envelope of cash on the hall table and reached for it. But my father said her name and she stopped. I've thought about that envelope every day for 10 years, she said. I waited for the apology. Then she added, your father did what he thought was right. He always has. You have to understand his position. Even now, she couldn't say he was wrong. I appreciated the call, but it didn't change what I was going to do. That last night, I made my decision. I wasn't going to destroy my father. I could have called the loan, taken the land, let Grand Vista collapse and burn the investors along with the Voss name. But those investors were Maeve's kind of people. Retirees, church widows, the ones I'd spent 10 years learning to protect. So I prepared 2 things: a folder with the deed, the note, the proof, and a real plan to make every investor whole. My company would restructure the project, scale it into something Ridgewood needed, and pay everyone back on a schedule starting that month. I wasn't there to take the house. I was there to take the lie out from under all of it, in front of everyone, and then do what none of them had done for me: make it right. The Ridgewood Community Hall was strung with warm lights that made everything look like money. I walked in 5 minutes late in my plain dark dress, and heads turned. That's Meredith the failure. What's she doing here? My father saw me and grabbed my elbow, hissing, you don't belong here. This is for investors, for family. 10 years later, he was still trying to put me out. Then he said it again, quieter. Go live in the streets. Meredith, you're embarrassing yourself. The same words. I didn't pull away, I just said, I'll leave when you've heard me out. You're going to want to hear me out, Dad. So is everyone here. Daniel saw me and went pale. He pulled me aside, his smile stretched tight. The investor, the one who bought the note, that's you, isn't it? He started talking fast, offering to fix things quietly. Name your number. He wanted to make the truth a private transaction, because men like Daniel know secrets are where they win, and daylight is where they lose. I told him I'd give my answer in front of everyone. My father, rattled, took the stage and performed. He announced Grand Vista was not in trouble, that a major private partner was ready to take the project into its next chapter. The room applauded. The elderly couple in the 3rd row gripped hands. The church widow pressed her chest. Then he gestured grandly toward the side, expecting some out-of-town money man. Instead, I stood up. The applause died as I walked to the stage, took the microphone gently from his hand, and turned to the room. My name is Meredith Voss. Most of you were told I failed. I want to introduce myself properly. I kept my voice low. I'm the founder of Voss & Conley Restoration. We build senior housing. Last year, we did about $15 million in business. And 3 days ago, my company became the partner my father has been promising you. Silence. Then a rising murmur. My father's face went gray. The mysterious savior he'd invented was real. He just never imagined it was the daughter he'd locked out in the rain. I let the quiet work, then spoke again as he started shouting. He grabbed for the mic, missed, and yelled. You think you can humiliate me after everything this family gave you? You ungrateful. Scheming. I opened my folder calmly and let him burn out. When he paused, I said, everything the family gave me. Let's talk about that. I held up the first page. For 6 years, someone drained a joint account my parents opened in my name. $40,000. A little at a time. Authorized by Daniel Whitfield. Heads turned to a pasty Daniel. I held up the second page. This is the Grand Vista loan, which my company now owns. Pledged as collateral, 40 acres my father has called Voss land his entire life. I held up the third page, my grandmother's deed, her signature and the county stamp. He doesn't own it. He never did. My grandmother signed it over to me years ago. He borrowed millions against land that was already mine. The room exhaled. My father stared at the deed like the floor had vanished. I said, I'm not here to take the house, Dad. I'm here so these people get to keep theirs. For the first time, he had nothing to say. I turned to the investors. I know some of you put in everything. Here's what's going to happen. My company will take over Grand Vista, scale it into something this town actually needs, and every single one of you will be paid back in full, starting this month. No one loses their retirement because they trusted the wrong Voss. The widow covered her face. The elderly couple nodded over and over. Then Daniel pushed up, trying for reasonableness now that quiet had failed. We can still fix this quietly. I looked at him. No, Daniel. We don't fix this quietly. We fix it honestly, out loud. Someone in back clapped. It spread rough, real applause. I stood on that stage holding my grandmother's deed and thought, this is what she meant. The only kind of rich that holds. The collapse was quiet and total. Within a month, Daniel faced investigation, and Caroline's life-leased cars, double-mortgaged house crumbled. She left Ridgewood, and I never heard from her again. My father kept his house for my mother's sake. But Grand Vista was no longer his. The billboards came down. The town turned. The same women who'd called me a drain now told how the Voss girl came back and paid everybody. The story they'd built out of lies was replaced by the truth with my name on it. My father found me in the parking lot afterward. He asked if I forgave him, not sorry, just wanting the account marked paid. I said, you told me to go live in the streets. So I went and built homes on them. Then I drove back to Marlowe and didn't look back. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a gift for the other person. It's deciding you're done carrying the weight. I set it down on that stage. The following spring, we broke ground on the 40 acres and built Iris Place, a senior community. Every investor was repaid. The elderly couple moved in. My mother wrote, not an apology but honest, asking if I'd come for coffee. I haven't yet, but I kept the letter in the steel box beside the deed. Some doors you leave where they are and let them mean what they mean. Here's what I know now. Worth isn't something your family hands you at dinner or takes back by turning off a light. You build it quietly, board by board, year by year, until the people who locked the door are the ones knocking. That's where I'll leave Meredith keys in her pocket. Porch light on. This time by her own hand. A locked door at 24. A signed deed at 34. A grandmother's $2,000 that started it all. If someone ever underestimated the quiet one in your family, share this with her tonight. Tell me her name in the comments. And subscribe to Tranquil Drama Stories. Because the next quiet woman is just getting started.